Josh McDaniels was fired literally right after we recorded that podcast. And I'm like, what has Josh McDaniels done in his career? Well, for me, when I see these offensive coordinators who are an offensive coordinator for these greatest quarterbacks, all-time great quarterbacks, we've seen it with Peyton Manning, how his Adam Gase struggled without him as a head coach, was one of the worst head coaches ever. The Patriot way, how Bill Belichick coordinators are outside of it. So Josh McDaniels, Tom Brady elevates him to a level where the Denver Broncos decide to take a chance on him. Great. It's his first head coaching opportunity. He deserved a shot. Might as well go ahead and give Josh McDaniels that opportunity. And then he goes with the Denver Broncos. They're pretty decent. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, he was filming practices and he was cheating. So he brought the wrong part of the Patriot way to Denver with him. And then he gets fired there. Tim Tebow's not the guy. People are like, he didn't get a fair shake. He had Kyle Orton and Tim Tebow on that team. So he never really had a chance to shine and show what a great quarterback guru he was. He goes back to New England. Tom Brady wins multiple Super Bowls with them, goes to Tampa. He makes the playoffs, leads Mac Jones to the playoffs the first year, his rookie year, and then they get absolutely demolished. They can't move the ball. He has an opportunity to be a head coach with the Indianapolis Colts, and this was the time where I was like, this isn't a guy who's going to change your franchise, change a culture like Nick Sirianni did, like a Mike McDaniels had in the past, like even a Kevin O'Connell. He gets offered the job in Indianapolis and he's like, I want to go home with Tom Brady and coach the Patriots because I'm going to be Bill Belichick's replacement in New England. Clearly that's not the case after making him one of the highest paid coordinators in the NFL. And then the Raiders have the whole John Gruden debacle where they have some racially charged emails that's brought to their attention. They're like, unfortunately, you are the highest paid coach. We gave you a 10-year deal, one of the dumbest contracts for a guy who was on TV, hadn't coached since the 2000s. You decide to make him your head coach. Then Richie Bisaccia steps up. Everyone is amped about him. He leads you to the playoffs. He beats the great Justin Herbert with Derek Carr. Derek Carr outduels Justin Herbert in that game. And they make the playoffs. Once they lose to the Cincinnati Bengals, he gives everyone a handwritten note. All 53 players on the roster. That's some amazing culture-changing head coach stuff, right? They're like, no, let's go out there and sign Josh McDaniels as our head coach, and then it's a disaster with Derek Carr the first year. Seems like they have a rough grip. Then he brings in his guy Jimmy G. Absolute disaster. Jimmy Garoppolo leads the league in turnovers. They have an airing of the grievances. Fire this guy. And then after that, Pat McAfee goes on, or Max Crosby goes on Pat McAfee, and he was like, yeah, everyone felt the vibe with Antonio Pierce, and it felt like we had a real alpha male as our head coach, and it felt like we could actually be ourselves, where Josh McDaniels was trying to tamper the personality of the team, make it Patriot way, super serious all of the time. And then players like Brandon Marshall have said before, I felt the most prepared I ever was with Denver, but the least inspired, and he just doesn't have the communication or personal skills to be a head coach. All of the red flags were there. You just had to look at the players' quotes who were coached under him in Denver. You ignore all of that, and now you're paying a ridiculous amount of money where you were going to fire him last year, but you were too broke to do it, and then you ended up having to just cut him out this year. And then you have Antonio Pierce now. And then now people are making fun of Josh McDaniels, like Max Crosby, saying, yeah, we actually have an alpha male as our head coach right now. Yikes.
Disaster. And the worst part of it all. So I want to touch on a couple things that we missed. So for the Broncos, not only did he start 7-0 and then find out he cheats and ends up going, I think he goes like 3-14 the rest of the way, gets fired. But his first pick as a Broncos head coach is to draft Tim Tebow in the first round, where he was supposed to go in like the second or third. That was a miss. They won that playoff game against the Steelers, but they shouldn't have won that game. And then he gets fired. And then you mentioned all the things with the Colts and everything. The Raiders, they have Devontae Adams. Mm-hmm. They have Hunter Renfrow. They have Jacoby Myers. They have all this talent. They have Josh Jacobs, who led the league in rushing last year. And yet their offense just sucks. it's almost to the level of the Steelers, actually probably worse, to be completely honest, because this offense, and even on the side of the defense, like you have Max Crosby, who's an absolute menace on the other side of the ball, and you guys just suck. You guys just suck. And, one thing that I'm scared of that the Raiders could do is that you fire Josh McDaniels. That's great. The city of Las Vegas is rejoicing for more than one reason. You have Antonio Pierce now, who I look at him and I think he kind of fits the Raiders mold. And if I'm the Raiders, maybe keep him as head coach next year because the team seems to really like him and they seem to be playing hard around him. But
He's a fan too. He's from Oakland.
he's from Oakland. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. He fits the Raiders culture and they've played good football. And in this game they did as well. But they're not going to do that because it's the Raiders. And what do we know about the Raiders the last 25 years? They're crazy. They're genuinely crazy. I mean, they drafted Cheeseburger Russell in 2007. He was an absolute disaster. All the other draft whiffs that they've had, they haven't had a first round pick hit since, I don't know, since I was probably in diapers at this point. So they're a disaster. So what are they going to do? They're probably going to go after Jim Harbaugh. Now, where are my sources? I don't have any sources. This is all hypothetical, but you watch the Brickyard podcast. We can predict pretty much anything on this show, and it might be true. They're not going to keep him as head coach, even though everyone on their team, they did the same thing with Rich Bisaccia. Everybody liked him. They basically won what was equivalent to basically a playoff game against the Chargers with Rich Bisaccia. They said, fuck you, Rich Bisaccia. I hate you. We're not going to keep you, even though the team likes you. And now with Antonio Pierce, they could rattle off some wins and contend for the playoffs at this point in the AFC, and they're not going to. Instead, they're going after Jim Harbaugh, who has scandals in Michigan in college football, and that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Not only that, they're paying John Gruden and Josh McDaniels $85 million the next 4 years. You heard that right. $85 million. And no, that is not Dak Prescott's contract. That is what they're paying their former head coaches at this point. John Gruden, by the way, who hasn't coached on this team in almost 3 years. Josh McDaniels, who by the time this contract is over, will probably be head coaching somewhere in college at this point.